Welcome back to the Sounds Like Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Henne, and I'm here today with Tim Brand, who is the founder and CEO of Many Hands, which was established in 2008. As CEO, he provides vision and leadership for U.S. and international operations. Many Hands impacts 25,000 people in 3 countries and reaches over 200,000 people per year in the Many Hands thrift U.S. retail stores. Selected as City View Business Journal as one of 20 business leaders making a difference in 2020, he dedicates his life to helping people release their God-given talent to be love in action. He authored the Amazon #1 bestseller for nonprofits, Standing on the Shoulders, a legacy story of a father, a son, and life's greatest gifts. He writes a bi-monthly 3-2-1 Impact newsletter, and he has led hundreds of people to impact trips and speaks to large groups of people from California to Florida. Prior to founding Many Hands in 2011, he spent 10 years in the for-profit business sector with experience in global strategies, global account management, IT, sales and management, and financial planning. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, whenever anyone reads my bio, it almost makes me blush sometimes. It's just one of those things where, I don't like to really toot my own horn a lot of this stuff, but God's been faithful in so many ways. And just thankful to be part of this journey and be able to sit with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. And I kind of feel like that too when I'm on the other side of this coin and I'm the one being interviewed and I'm like, I'm just me. I'm just somebody
Yeah.
who loves Jesus and is being obedient. But at the same time, being on this side, it is nice to know who you are and what you're bringing
Oh,
and
for
the
sure.
treasures that God has put in you to share with those around you. So, can you tell us about your vision and how you got started?
Yeah, so I went on a mission trip in 1998 when I was a senior in high school. Gives you a little bit of idea of how old I am. It was a good trip. It wasn't this life-altering trip. But then in 2000, I was in my sophomore year in college making some not so great life choices, as many of us do when we spread our wings. And I just knew this wasn't the path I was supposed to go. And I said to my roommate, we need to pray. And it was in that prayer that I heard a very audible voice say, go back to Haiti. And I didn't know what that meant. And then the next day I woke up and there was an email in my inbox asking me to be a college leader to go back to the place I went 2 years earlier. It was at the end of that trip that I made a lifelong commitment to say I'd be involved in the country of Haiti in some way, shape, or form. I always thought it'd be like, sponsor a child, go on a trip. But then God had other plans. And just through these natural progressions of me stepping out in faith and meeting me in that, it became evident that this was something I was uniquely called into to go out and what I always tell people is I'm a dream giver. I've had the opportunity to hear people's dreams and hear what they want, but they don't know how to get there. And so like when we work in Haiti or I work with our thrift store employees or I work even with like walking my dad through the final 6 weeks of his life is there's a vision for where I think God has for our lives. And part of my unique gifting and my unique thumbprint is to be able to speak truth into that and to give people pathways to that life that God has for them, and to be able to create that dream that God has to instill that into them, whether it be through me encouraging them, me being able to share some things that I see in them, or to create tangible pathways of this is how we can make this possible.
So important because people like me, I'm the dreamer and I have a
Yep.
vision and I have no idea how to get there.
Yeah.
So I always say, Laverne Kreider is somebody who's been so important and so impactful in my life. Her and her husband lead an international, or just they founded an international ministry, and they call them lengtheners and strengtheners.
Yep.
People are lengtheners, and then there's strengtheners like you. They're like, well, how do we get there? What are the nuts and
Yep.
bolts? What's the pathway? So key, so important,
Yep.
and such a beautiful gifting. Somebody like me who's like, I don't know, I just have this big vague vision. It's
Yep.
so beautiful to me to see somebody that's like, I see the way. I see how we can get there. So it sounds like
Correct.
you started out in for profit, then you went non for profit. Can you tell us about the transition there?
Yeah, so I spent 10 years in the for-profit. I went to school, computer information systems. So business was my background. I love business. I grew up my dad was an entrepreneur, so he started his own company. And I always thought I was going to be taking over his company. And so I went and got my master's degree. I got my MBA, all those sort of things. And what I found out later, again, through God's journey, is all those things that I learned and all these gifts and talents that I learned through this 10 years of accumulation in the for-profit world. When I was ready to make the leap to found the organization and go full time, that had already been put into place. And so I share this a lot with young people. The vision that God gives you when He speaks truth into you about where it is that you're going to go, or a vision that He shares, what the vision is true. Like the vision is true from the Lord. The question is the timing of the vision. We as Western Americans in particular, we love to put parameters around that timing. So if God shares a vision, it's supposed to be within a certain amount of time. But at the end of the day, is like God's timing is not our timing. And so I'm so thankful for those 10 years in the for-profit sector, because it gave me experience then in the IT world. It gave me in the entrepreneurial world with my dad's company. It gave me experience in a global organization where I met global contacts. It gave me some financial background, gave me IT background. And so when I went full time and founded this, and it didn't make sense to me until I finally got there. It's like, oh, we have to make a website. Well, I can do that. Oh, we have to do the books. Well, I can actually do that. Oh, it's just me to rely on it. Well, I can do that. Oh, we need to create a strategy and be able to share this global strategy. Well, I've done that. And I've had all these experiences that then led me to this point where, okay, now the path all makes sense. Whereas in the moment, it was always like, why am I having to start over again? Why do I got to start in a new role, a new position, a new company, all these different things? But I am so thankful. And so again, I didn't make that leap till I was 32 years old, as far as like going full time all in. I started the organization in '08, and I always thought I was going to be president of the board and then just kind of do my thing. And the thing that God reminded me of multiple times was, number one, His ways are better than my ways 100% of the time. He's always going to do more than I can imagine, but I have to get out of my own way and I got to be all in. And what I mean by that is I have always been one that I want to be in the driver's seat of my life. And I want Jesus in the back seat of the car to tell me left or right, but like I still want to be in control. And what He says to me repeatedly always is, hey, I don't want to be in the back seat. I'm going to be in the driver's seat, and you are going to be in the back seat and be available wherever I'm taking you. And when you do that, I will do more than you ever imagined. But you have to allow me to sit in that front seat and to drive. And so again, through this call and responses, it was that letting go, that surrendering. My wife and I's wedding song was "I Surrender All," and that's been continuing to have to be the thing. Is like surrendering, 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 because we can't control outcomes, but we can control our obedience to what our calling is, our unique thumbprint, our unique purpose in the world. And so that transition for 10 years in the for-profit, I will tell any nonprofit leader, go get experience in the for-profit world, because it is invaluable when you start the nonprofit side of things. It is not a throwaway time. In fact, I learned so much from my for-profit time. At the same point is when I went to go do this full time, is I wanted it to be where I don't own this. It's not mine. This isn't my ministry. This is God's ministry, and I'm a steward of that ministry. And that had to be done in a nonprofit setting.
Absolutely. And there's some things I want to pull out from what you said. So I think they can be key for people who are in that waiting time. Because as you said, it can be hard. And you start asking, like, what am I even doing? Like, does this even count? Does this matter? Because I know that God is this in my heart. It's like this vague, nebulous calling, this assignment, but I'm all the way over here. And I think that what you said was key, was surrender, and surrender the process. Because I always, God won't bring you to the end point if you haven't been faithful through the process. And He doesn't waste anything. God is so creative. I think sometimes we are so limited in our creativity that we think, well, how can this possibly be used? I mean, I'm a mom, right? And when you go through the early motherhood stages and all you're doing is up all night, you know,
Yep.
feedings and diaper changes, and then the toddler years, and it surrounds around, toilet training schedules and nap times and snack time, and you think, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can God even use this? and and yes, of course, investing in my children, but even in my own life, the character that He forges and the depths of going deep in the presence of the Lord, even in the chaos and in the tired, those are lessons that God can pull forward no matter what season He calls you into next. But if I'm not faithful in that season, how am I going to get to the next? And so, yeah, I think that's so key. that surrender and surrendering each season and knowing that God uses it all, and he'll even use our blunders. God
Yeah,
is so
for sure.
creative. He even uses our blunders for his glory, which is incredible. And I think too, what I'm hearing is so much humility and saying, you know what, God, it's all about you and it's yours, it's for you. And I think that's key too for people looking to really accomplish what God has for them, is that surrendered humility and that posture. And it can go so much bigger and farther than we could ever ask or imagine, for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think people get really hung up on the immediate, and, we can't let go of the immediate because you gotta be where your feet are. End of the day is, like, you have to be where your feet are, but at the same point is be more concerned about your trajectory than necessarily where you're currently at, because the trajectory is really where God's heart is and where he wants you to, and are you drawing closer to him? If you look back a year from now or 2 years from now or even 1 month from now, am I becoming more Christ-like or not? And no matter what season it is, whether I'm raising kids, toddlers up all night, or whether I'm leading some international nonprofit, the trajectory of am I drawing closer to that is where God's heart really is. And sometimes you have to be, not sometimes, almost all the time, you have to be faithful in each season because it's going to come. I mean, I go back to like Moses. Moses had a vision early. God told him things multiple times, but he had to go wander the desert for a long time, and he had to go be alone, and he had to go learn how to take care of sheep and to be a shepherd. And then he called him at the burning bush, and even then, it wasn't like he immediately went to Pharaoh and freed the Israelites. There was so much wandering, and part of that is it's God's protection of our hearts because we have to prepare ourselves,
mhm.
and he has to prepare us for what he's trying to put into us. And that season of waiting allows for him to really mold and shape our hearts. So when that time comes where that vision is finally fulfilled in some way, that we can then say, no, that wasn't me, that was God. Because ultimately he gets the glory. And that's the whole point of this, is to glorify God in our lives in the here and now, to bring heaven to earth. That was his commandment, is like to bring heaven to earth and to have that be God's glory, not our glory.
Absolutely. And I love how you used like the Israelites and Moses's example of the wilderness. And one thing, it's in the scripture too, where God calls the desert a garden. And if I look at the desert, I'm like, a garden? How? And even if we bring that metaphor forward into our lives, God calls that desert place a garden because of the richest of character that he forges in us and making us more into his image. And the word he gave me was like, you need to have that breakthrough with the Lord in you, so that the breakthrough doesn't break you.
Yep.
Because if he just plops us right at, like, take Moses, if he just plopped him in front of the Red Sea, or just, without that forging process, without that faith building process and character forging process, what would have happened? Would it have
Yeah.
been the display of faith that we have today in our Bibles? And it's just, God is so faithful because he cares about each person's heart more than he cares about the end result. It's the whole thing, it's the whole package that he cares about, for sure. So you have your non-for-profit in your bio. You talk about thrift stores, which I love to thrift. I love
Yep.
thrift stores, and I love thrift stores that support ministries. Can you talk to
Yep.
us about your thrift stores and what they are supporting?
Yeah, well, let me give you the origin story because it'll give you a little bit of understanding of why and how we do things. So, my wife's a thrift store shopper. She's the one. We have two kids. They're older now, but back in the day, that was the best place to go buy most of the kids' stuff. But I had never done that, and so part of it, when I surrendered, went full time into ministry, and all I heard from the Lord was be available. And so when I was available, one of the things I ran into was a soccer coach, and he said, "Hey, I'll raise some. Do your kids in Haiti need soccer shoes?" And I said, "Absolutely, they do." And he says, "Well, let's do a fund drive to get you some soccer shoes." So we did that. Well, he ended up raising like 200 pairs of shoes, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all these shoes?" And someone said, "Go to your local thrift store and buy some suitcases and bring them down." So I go to my local thrift store, and there was packed. There was all kinds of people there, and I'm like, "What is going on here?" And then I went to go check out, and I said, "Last year we gave $200,000 to Romania for Bibles. I was like, $200,000. That's a lot of money, especially when we were just starting out. That was huge. And so I was like, what's going on here? And then it fast forwarded my mind to in 2008, we brought a container of shoes down into Haiti, and we were distributing them. And the issues with free distributions is there's always an end of the line, and when the end of the line happens, there's chaos that ensues, and it's not great to witness. There's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of arguing, there's a lot of people trying to budge their way in the line. And the second thing is when I handed out those shoes, is I was there to be Jesus with skin on, to show the love of Christ. And I was walking home, and I'd go through the vendor market, and I was like, what do these vendors think of me right now? Because they're sitting alongside the road trying to sell shoes, and I literally just came in with the free containers of shoes and just gave them out. And I said, there has to be a better way. And so what we did is looked at the process. And if Deborah, give me a pair of shoes, I go down to Haiti and I go give my shoes to someone in need, that helps. But at the end of the day, there's no economics happening. There's no money happening. And frankly, there's only 3 people involved. But if I instead say, hey, Deborah, how about you give your shoes to Armenian thrift markets? We in turn use volunteers and staff, and we sell them locally to help our own backyard where there's a high quality item at a lower cost that's shows with dignity, to be able to shop with dignity, with quality of product, quality of care, clean, smells good, all those kind of things. And then there's money exchange. And I take the money down to Haiti, and now I go buy from those vendors, and now those vendors get involved. And then I take that shoe that I just bought from them, and if I still want to give it away for free, I can go do that. But now I've got 5 to 6 people involved. Plus, there's economics happening. Plus, I've got my local community supporting this, and I've got a global community supporting it because I'm providing jobs. And it's like, that's just such a better way to go do this, because ultimately, all this is God's resources. And so I go back to business as like, everything is God's anyway. And if we look at it, it's like, okay, whether it's my stuff, whether it's my time, whether it's my talents, it's all God's. But how can you use that to his glory? And so there's this whole thing called disease of more, which I believe strongly that we have the disease of more. We think more is going to make us happy. We have this idea that, well, if we can just do one more thing, get one more item, get our kids in one more program where it makes us happy. And then it is, it's a false lie. It's a lie that we're hearing from the world and the devil, and ultimately it doesn't make us happy. So how can we take this disease of more and flip it on its head and say, let's use it for God's glory? Well, let's take those items, let's sell them locally, let's help the people right in our backyard that want a higher quality item at lesser cost. I can also then give vouchers to my churches. I can give vouchers to those in need. I can supply my homeless shelters with product because we donate all kinds of things to our homeless shelters, to our different migrant communities or immigrant communities. And then at the same time, though, is there's economics happening. And so our stores have won multiple awards. We've won the best of throughout the city of Des Moines. We've actually beat high-end retail stores, with a thrift store being like the best local retail store, period. Not just thrift store, but like the best one, period. And last year we had right around 31,000 hours of volunteer time that was donated through our stores. And then all those profits go back to support global missions. And so it funds our admin and overhead, because one of the things with nonprofits is, well, what's your admin overhead? And so we've been able to keep our admin overhead extremely low. And not only that, but I can actually pay for my admin and overhead from my stores. So when donations come in from, let's say, your listeners or whoever they are, I can say with 100% certainty, well, all your donations will go to the end user, because we take care of our own admin overhead through our own businesses, through our own stores. And that's part of that 10 years in the for-profit sector. And starting businesses, I started frozen yogurt shops, I started thrift stores, I started an online business, but they all go back to funding our nonprofit and being a generosity engine. So we call them generosity engines. We want to ignite generosity in people, because when you ignite generosity, generosity doesn't just break in one area. If you've ever met someone that's generous, they're usually generous with their things, but they're also generous with their time. They're generous with their forgiveness. They're generous with their grace. They're generous with how they view the world. And if we can show people through incredible generosity that God is good, because who was the most giving person of all time? Jesus and God. He gave himself to us. Thus, why do we do this? Because what Jesus did for us. And now we're in turn being generous to you. And let's take this stuff and let's go change the world by starting these incredible stores.
That's awesome. I am so inspired by that. I love that story. I love that vision and that passion. And I like that phrase, generosity engine. I really like that. And I love how God gave you wisdom of how to basically be a tent maker, like Paul, where he
Correct.
founded his own missions and his own missions work, um, and stimulating economy in multiple areas and regions. It's so inspiring. Let me put your website up here, mh4h.org. And what can people find on the website?
So on that one, so that's our Haiti operation. So you'll go through our 11 action model. You see how we actually do community. We're a little bit different in that we go an inch wide, mile deep, and we go deep in relationship, deep into community. So we actually have a 7-year journey that we walk with a family. And again, I'm not sure that it's, whatever people can do, they can do. But like, for example, my goal isn't to create schools across all of Haiti. I want to create a couple really quality schools in the communities that we serve, the families that we know. But I want to wrap that around with services of like, how are we fixing up the homes of the kids that go to our school? How do we create jobs for the families that go to our school? How do we help making sure they're taken care of medically for the kids that go to our school? How to make sure they have a relationship with Jesus for the kids that go to our school? How to make sure that mom and dad are married for the kids that go to our school? So we geographically say we're going to work in this area, 5-kilometer radius area. And within that radius, we're going to do all these 6 areas of building blocks of Christ, and how he worked and how he did things, particularly around when we talked about Luke and you read the Isaiah scrolls. And we are going to bring good news through the work, through our love and action, and we're going to transform lives. And we're going to do that through relationship. And so that's our Haiti operation. We've also then expanded into the Bahamas, Abaco, Bahamas in particular. They were hit by a devastating hurricane in 2019. They also have a large immigrant population that comes on the island. And so we work there. And then we have our Many Hands thrift stores, which is our manyhandsthrift.com. Yeah, manyhandsthrift.com, which is our thrift store specifically. But it all ties together. And ultimately, we try to say, how do we, Deborah, you and I, how do we live a life of impact? How do we live the life that's God called us to, so that at the end of this whole thing, we can say, we have transformed to be more Christ-like, and we have a story to testify to the world through our actions, not just our words, but through our actions. And that's what we're trying to create within all of us, because I'm called to transform. My Haitian brothers and sisters are called to transform, but we are transforming together to be more and more like Christ.
Amen. Amen. I love it. So, and I love how you talk about dealing with all the issues, not just one issue, but going
Right.
deep with these people, looking at them and caring about them as people and as family units, their mental health, their spiritual health, their relational health. I absolutely love that. So if people wanted to partner with you, how could they partner with you?
So if you go on the website, number one, there's if you're a specific area, like I really love the fun educational things, or I love the fun leadership development, or I'm all about agriculture and how do we grow food, or there's certain things you can give towards that. The other thing is we have what I believe strongly is our first 1,000 days program, because if we can take care of mothers and small children from the time they're in the womb through the first 1,000 days of life, we actually eliminate so many problems later in life. And so we're always looking for people to sponsor that first 1,000 days program, because we give that as a free gift to anyone in our geographical area. But then once they finish that first 1,000 days program, we start to do what we call Power to the Parents program, where that's where they start to take ownership of their own lives to create a story, and to build that resilience into their life so they can take care of their own child. Because we believe that by the time they hit first grade, the parents should be able to pay for their own child's education. And we've gone from roughly 10% of our families that can pay for their own child's education by first grade, that we're now around 98.5% of our families can actually take care of their own education for their own family. Because again, some of us, we say, well, of course they can't pay for their own child's education. We as Americans should run in and just do it for them. And we need to help set up a building block so they can get some of our generosity, because we have to take care of our flock. But at the same point, the goal is that we do this forever. The goal is like, how do we help you live your God-given purpose? Because you are a child of God, and you have the ability to be able to work in God's kingdom and not just receive, but also to give. And so we see you as a vital key member of God's kingdom, that you are a child of God that has a purpose and a plan, that you can also be a giver into God's community, not just a receiver, not just a taker, And that's one of the things that we have to help equip. It's like, how do we not rob them of that dignity to be able to do that within their communities and to build upon that? And so again, there's ways to partner like that. The other thing is, if you ever want to go on an impact trip, which is where we take people physically for 7 days. We work through Impact, and Impact is actually a curriculum. It stands for Immersive Missions, Personal Action, Challenge, and Transformation. We work people through that curriculum of how do you live a life of impact, how to be a person for impact. And then we go to the Bahamas, Abaco, Bahamas, then you experience that for 7 days, and we get you deep in the community and deep within each other to take a look at what's the story that God's building within this community, what's the story within my community, what's the story within me, and how do I take what I've learned and go back home and now be a better husband, wife, son, daughter, community member, church member, business person in my own community, because that's really where God's going to call you to serve 97% of the time. Most of the time, he's going to equip you right where you're at. And so that's our goal, is like, let's take you and put you into community in a really consecrated way, in a really intentional way, but then at the same point, allow you to come back to your own community and say, now you've got some tools to go be that change that you wish to see in the world.
Amen. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your testimony, for sharing about your ministry. I am so inspired. But yeah, check it out, mh4h.org and manyhandsthrift.com, I believe is what you
Yep.
said, the thrift store. Check it out. Go ahead, support his ministry. Maybe check out one of his trips and get elbows deep in what he's doing and the great work he's doing and empowering people to fuel that generosity engine. And don't forget to swipe, tap, or click over to deborahhenne.com. Follow me on social on the X, Instagram, or Facebook at Deborah Henne Author. And let's not forget to tune into our thoughts to make sure they sound like Jesus's, so they sound like freedom.